Good. Well, welcome everyone to the next installment of the AI Coach Connection Expert Series. And with us today, we have Denise Murtha Bachmann, and she's been around the sales world for a long time, and that means just lots of great experience and a lot of great accomplishments. And throughout her career, she's negotiated and closed deals exceeding 74 million, collaborating with some of the most prestigious Fortune 500 organizations. And over the latter half of her career, she's been immersed in the realm of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we had a chance to connect a little bit and talk about that ourselves, and that's what brought us together here. And um, and the thing that we also have in common is that Denise believes firmly that while the AI and machine learning technology is fabulous, we have to keep the human touch. And so in 2022, Denise left her corporate world and started down the entrepreneurial path. And she founded Success with AI, driven by a mission to guide organizations through the transformative shifts brought about by AI, but with a human focus. And then shortly thereafter, her passion for sales and an exceptional sales process, she launched Celevators. And she's going to talk about that a little bit in the program today. But her brainchild, Celevators, is a pioneering program designed to empower high-level sales organizations and professionals, and it's a revolutionary force ushering sales organizations, executives, and professionals into the era of AI integration in four crucial areas of the sales process. And she'll describe those four areas for us during the talk today. And then it also increases enhanced efficiencies that empower organizations to then shift their focus and prioritize the human touch within their sales strategies. So spend less time doing unimportant things and more time doing the human things that matter. And this entails not only cultivating relationships, but also elevating every aspect of the sales process where a human touch is irreplaceable. And the outcome is the creation of a new pipelines and the successful closure of existing business, ensuring quota attainment and boosting revenue. Denise has a deep-seated commitment to elevating the human dimension in AI, which led to strategic collaborations with the Human AI Institute and Acetly Institute, a nonprofit organization. We'd love to hear about that. And her visionary leadership has earned her top recognition in the 100 Innovators and Entrepreneurs magazine, as well as standing LinkedIn top voice and top sales voice on LinkedIn. So some great accomplishments there. And beyond that, Denise has a passion for enhancing human experience in her personal life with a keen focus on family. She strives to create a lasting legacy for her loved ones. An unshakable commitment drives every day, motivating her to reach new heights in both professional and her personal journey. So, welcome, Denise.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here, Bruce and Gwen. I appreciate it very, very much. Warm welcome.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So, Gwen, do you want to start off with a few questions?
I would love to start off with a few questions. So I am so thrilled to have Denise here as someone who had a long career in sales. It's really especially exciting for me to hear from her, to have her here. And Denise, you had this amazing, incredibly successful career in corporate sales. And so I'm so curious to find out what inspired you to pivot and launch this AI-focused venture after all that time.
Yeah, so thank you for asking, because, we know that in the corporate world, you can make a lot more money than you can when you start your own business. And once you've had your business, then you see a lot more success, right? But the start, so why in the heck would I do something like that? Well, essentially, it was because during the time, it was right after COVID, right? So we were all sequestered to being at home. We were all isolated, and companies were starting to evolve a bit differently. So I'd been in, there's a long story, but I'll make the short of it. I spent 11 and a half years at one company and, multiple year stints at other ones prior to that. But that was in 2020 when I left that company. And in the following 2 years, I had two and was looking for a third job. So I'd gone from 11 and a half years to 2 different companies and a potential third one because I hated my job. And I'd known always that I had wanted to own my own business. And I realized that there was a gap that I could help fulfill. And that was at the time what was lacking at both of these companies. They were both AI, so they were both innovative technology companies. And yet they were adopting these new technologies and solutions to leverage within the sales process and doing a really terrible job at it. And what I realized was at that moment was, there's great value. I love AI and automation and machine learning. There are some great advantages. But if we don't know how to leverage it effectively, there are going to be some negative implications. And so that was why I went to my husband and I said, Andreas, do you mind if I quit my job? Otherwise, I'm gonna have to go look for a new one. And I don't want to do that. And I've always wanted to start my own business. And he was like, so I guess, well, what in the heck does that mean? I'm not really quite sure what supporting you means, but if you want to go do it, go ahead and do it. So he allowed me to quit. And so I went off on my own and I started Success with AI with the intent to really just consult and evangelize. But what I realized was I wasn't a thought leader and I wasn't an influencer. So evangelizing does not pay a whole heck of a lot of money. And that's when I hired a third business coach who then helped me extract all of my sales experience and success, coupling that with my enthusiasm for AI, and then tying it all together with my ethos, which is humanization, and bringing together this program called Celevators. So it's not forget how you pronounced it, Bruce.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Celevators.
Celevators. Okay,
yes.
thank you.
So it's sell, innovate, combine those two, and just add the Z for innovation, right?
Thank you. Good. Celevators. That's much easier.
So there you go. That's why I
Yes.
quit started.
Excellent.
Very nice. And yeah, you developed Celevators, as I understand it, to integrate AI into 4 key sales areas. And I would love it if you could walk us through those 4 areas and how AI can enhance versus replace human roles.
Yeah. So the 4 key areas where I believe in the sales process that you should leverage are lead generation or lead nurturing, client nurturing, and then forecasting. In the middle, we've got forecasting and customer insights. And traditionally, all of those require manual efforts. So for example, we'll take forecasting. That's not one that I spend a whole lot of time on because not everyone does forecasting, especially, those of us who are coaches. We probably do a not so great job, although we should probably get better at forecasting, right? But we'll use that because there's simplicity in that example. But when you talk about forecasting, most organizations, even the larger ones, tend to do it based on tribal knowledge, gut feel, based on a manager kind of knowing their sales teams, and then basing their report back up to, taking all of that intricate detail needed in order to form their own opinion, and then feeding up what they think the shareholders want, right? Or upper management want. And so what a AI solution will enable you to do is still go through your forecasting efforts that you should as an individual sales contributor and as a manager, but enable you then to put AI around it so that it actually looks at all the data, the past history. And instead of going by tribal knowledge or gut feel, because tribal knowledge sometimes is skewed and not always 100% accurate, right? And gut feel we know is great if it's someone who really knows how to read their intuition, but the reality is how many of us are really good at it? I mean, it's taken me 51 years to even get to know my own tuition, right? So so that takes a lot of that mess out of that and really just bases it on data, which is really helpful. But if we look at, so that's one area where I see that really adding the most advantage, where you're leveraging an AI solution almost a bit more than you are the human interaction. But then the other 3 areas, and I'll use, lead and client nurturing are the 2 that really kind of go hand in hand, although they're the beginning and the ending of the sales cycle, right? But in those 2 areas, it's about creating a workflow. If we think back 5 years ago, maybe even 6 years ago, it was really 5 to 8 touch points when you could finally engage with your buyer or prospective buyer. Now it's anywhere from 15 to 20 touch points. And the average person doesn't have the patience nor the desire to spend that much time going after the same person over and over. In fact, stats will show that after about the 5th follow-up, most people give up. They just don't want to follow up anymore. When you're leaving potential money on the table, knowing that you've got it takes 15 to 18, 20, 15 to 20 touch points, and you're going to walk away after the 5th. I mean, kind of crazy, right? But that's what we do as human beings. That's innate to us to just get bored. Or the other scenario is we find an opportunity, we're super excited, we work and put all of our effort in there, and then we let everything else go to the wayside, right? And then you still have no pipe that you're building. So with lead and client nurturing, what it enables you to do is actually leverage automation solutions that will start to create a workflow so that you can actually have those 15 to 20 touch points throughout the entire, whether it's a 30-day or 60-day, but throughout that entire lead nurturing cycle. And it allows you, if you leverage it accurately, but this is where most do a poor job, they set the workflow and let it flow without any engagement with us as the human. But what we should be doing is once we let it flow, we constantly pay attention to it. You're constantly monitoring it so that if someone actually responds, yay, someone responded, you actually got them to engage after the second one, you notice that, and then you go in and add some changes to the next step in the workflow, and then probably change all those steps thereafter, right? By the way that they responded. Or when you go in and look at that next email, it's maybe not even an email anymore that you need to change. It's like a completely different next step that has to be taken. So being very cautious of making sure that you're monitoring the process is how you still keep that human engaged in really truly being able to implement a solution that gives you this new ability to focus on higher value activities. It creates these efficiencies so you can focus on higher value activities, but still enables you to be engaged with the process so that you don't let it get out of control. And it's just the robot or the machine or the solution taking all the work effort.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, as someone who's actually done all of this work manually, it's really cool to see it done in a more automated fashion. Now, of course, you are really so clued into the human touch and the human element being a part of this. And clearly you illustrated that at some point when you do hopefully get that client engaged at that point, the rest of that automation actually becomes a little more manual. So I'm curious about how that actually works and how labor intensive it is, given the idea that we're really looking to leverage these technologies to take work off our plates.
Yeah, so I think that depends. What we have to do as individuals is understand first off, where are we from a technology perspective, right? So as coaches, we're all good at a lot of things. Some are even really great or excellent at some things, but where do you stand with technology and software? Because if you are terrible at it, it's going to take you a lot longer to implement a potential solution than someone who actually has a little bit of knowledge or experience. So I think what you have to do is really decide, to determine how labor intensive it is really how much do you know? And then what parts of the sales process are you looking at? Because if, for example, forecasting, most of us don't do forecasting. We should do a better job of it. If we're going to actually look at a solution that might fit and do the forecasting for us, if we have no clue about really how to do forecasting, then it's going to be harder and more intensive for us to actually find a solution, because we got to do the work effort first to understand a little bit more about forecasting, right? But then if we look at lead nurturing, we all do lead nurturing. Now, how good we do it is questionable, right? Per individual. But, we all do lead nurturing. So it'll be easier for us to seek out and find solutions for that require less intensive labor or time spent on implementing because we actually understand the process. So we don't have a whole lot of education there. But then when you're looking for a new solution in general, whether it's for lead nurturing, forecasting, or any of the different processes, one of the things that I find that is frustrating for me to see is that a lot of people, and I've been guilty of probably doing this as well, which is you get excited because you hear about this brand new tool. And so you're like, oh, I want to try out that tool. And so you bring it on and you're like, oh, this is really cool. And then you start to use it and you spend some time and you start to create some processes and get some knowledge. But here you look back and you think, oh my gosh, I've probably spent 20 hours working on this. And what was the outcome, right? So most people, and I see this not just with coaches, but in larger organizations even, they will go out and consume all of these new technologies without doing their due diligence by first having an actual objective and goal in mind. Because there are a lot of tools for a lot of different things. But if it's not going to move the needle in a way that adds value to your bottom revenue line, then why in the heck are you even going to look at it? Why are you going to waste those 10, 20 hours that you could be putting in somewhere else that is actually going to move the needle, right? So I think it's really understanding what your goals and objectives are, and then making sure that when you do understand what those are, is how much then are you capable of doing yourself, or how much do you have to have someone else help you with? And I think that therein lies the decision making in which tools to really select. So I hope that helped, Gwen.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You kind of preempted one of my upcoming questions, which is the fact that many of us, in particular, those of us who are flying solo or have very small teams as entrepreneurs, struggle with leveraging this technology effectively. Either we're just not very techy, or like you were saying, we get so into the technology itself, we're not very clear on how we're going to use it. And yeah, we end up wasting time in that process of research.
Yes. Or even just playing, because even playing can be really exciting. But then what's the point when you're done with it? What is
exactly
gotten out of it, right?
Exactly right. I have been down that rabbit hole many times myself.
Yep.
We all
Could we take a specific scenario here? So we're talking about solo coaches, and they're going to have some kind of opt-in to do lead generation and nurturing. And from your perspective, let's talk about how would AI be used, and then when do you need to bring human touch into that? And that's going to be scenario number one. And then scenario number two is going to be like we're doing with Chris Colt and the challenge champions, when we're running challenges or workshops or any kind of live event. Chris teaches us, of course, to do pre-selling before the event, so that after the event we can, it's much more easy to turn those clients in, or turn those people who come to the events into clients, full paying clients. And that's, of course, the goal of all those events. And so how would we use AI and mix AI and the human touch in that piece? Because I would imagine in the lead nurturing, we're staying more automated and less human touch until people start raising their hand. But in this other piece, we use some AI, but there's a lot of human touch. So why don't you kind of talk about those two scenarios and kind of the continuum of AI versus human and automation there?
Yeah, so I will say, I wish I'd had enough time to research this before I jumped on this call. It was just brought to my attention probably 15 minutes before the call. There is a brand new solution out there that might contradict or upturn everything I really say, and it's called yep.so. So YEP.so. It actually sends AI agents out and will do all of the work effort for you, which includes scheduling, qualifying. I mean, it's pretty doggone cool, although
Wow.
I've not tested it out. So I will caveat everything that I say right now with, there might already be something out there that can do all of this for you that I am excited to, and I actually am going to try it out because I can use it with my right? Not even just for myself, but I can actually recommend it as part of the tool set for my clients, especially when, I'm talking to some of the smaller organizations where they're, founders or, smaller entrepreneurs, smaller businesses. But that all being said, in the first one, we talk about lead nurturing. Even then, in the very onset, you should be leveraging AI. There are solutions like Zoom Info, which is a little bit less accurate. So it's not quite as good as it used to be when it was the only solution out there. You have other solutions like Seamless. That's one of the better ones. And you've got even just something as simple as Crystal Knows that you can put in and look at LinkedIn profiles. But the idea is leveraging AI before you even start to create your lead or prospecting list by understanding who you want to target first. And those types of solutions will give you all the information that you might need, from buying personas to buying history. The Crystal Knows will tell you like their disc. So if you're looking at just extrapolating data from LinkedIn, you can get their disc profile, what type of buying persona that they are specifically based on that disc profile, what keeps them up at night, what some of their character tendencies are. I mean, you can get as granular as that, or with Seamless, look more at buying history, what solutions what part of the business do they spend the most money in? How much money are they spending? So if you can gather all of this information, then you can actually then target a really good prospecting list, so that the time that you actually spend in creating the workflows are actually being put to good use, right? Because I think a lot of the times we do a really poor job and I say poor, that's really harsh. So we don't do as great a job at creating a prospecting list as we should. So for example, if I think about myself in sales, I could easily just say, I'm going to target all salespeople. Okay, well, that's a lot of freaking people. Now, how in the heck are you going to personalize anything when you're targeting that many people? Because you got men, you got women, you got older, you got younger, you got moms, you got dads. I mean, there's no way that you can personalize all of those people, right? So instead, maybe it's women who are in their 45 to 55 age range who are moms. Now, I don't target, this is not my persona that I target, but I'm using this as an example, right? So I want to not only niche down my target, but then I want to say, okay, so if I've niched down and I've gotten my ICP, right, which we all have most of those anyway, nailed down, that's not enough. It's now then, okay, if I'm looking at my ICP, I need to see who is not making their sales numbers, like who is struggling to actually get clients, who is not doing a really great job at hitting their revenue targets, who do I see that is out there and only doing if LinkedIn is one of your strategies, right? They're not doing a great job on LinkedIn because here are the things that I see that they're doing wrong. Yet, and you can see that they've been here for a bit of time, but they're not showing a lot of customer, success stories. It's taking all of those different characteristics that allow you to really hone in on a much more specific target list. And all of that information, you can leverage other tools like, again, Crystal Knows, Seamless, and there's a ton of others, right? Those are the two that are top of mind to get you much more granular so that you create a targeted list. Then once you've done that, then what you can do is leverage the automation tools. You've got Outreach, you've got Seamless. We leverage Go High Level, right? Which is actually ClickHubs, right? That's the OEM version of Go High Level. So it doesn't really matter what automation you tool, anything that has email sequencing, and then you create a sequence. If you know it's 15 to 20 touch points, you most certainly want to make sure that you create a sequence that fosters that 15 to 20 touch points. And then you got to decide, okay, so this guy, it looks like, is really active on LinkedIn. So maybe I want to focus just on DMs for this guy. And this person, I don't see him really active on LinkedIn at all, but I know he's going to be a good target. So I've got to find him another way. So maybe I'll try email first, right? So you've got to really think about how, and that's where the human part of us, the human engagement has to be part of the process in trying to determine what the workflow is. what I would say when you've got a list, you want to try to find a commonality amongst them so you can put them into different buckets so that you can try to put, a few of them in the same bucket. So all of those people who use LinkedIn every single day, those are the ones you maybe want to start with DMs, and vice versa, right? Not vice versa, but you get what, et cetera, right? You get what I mean. So it doesn't matter, but put them in the bucket so that you can create workflows for multiple people. And then you start the workflow. Now, I would say the one thing I always say to everyone is, as part of when I talk about how to improve sales, when you are engaging with someone, you always give them 3 things before you ask for one. So you always give them 3 things before you ask for one. So in that engagement or that lead nurturing process, when you're reaching out those 15 to 20 times, you want to make sure that you're giving them bits of information, resources, things that they can take away, that they can remember. It isn't considered a one item unless they actually respond or engage or react to it. Until they actually engage or react or respond in some form or another, it's not really one item, because you don't even know if they've even looked at it, right? But you want to, so when you're creating your sequence, you want to make sure that you keep in mind that should they respond, engage, react, open up. So if you've got a tracker on a doc and you send them a doc and they open it up, if should they take any action on anything that you send, then that's when you obviously want to go back in and alter now the sequence, because they've taken some sort of action from something you've provided them. So now you got to alter the sequence. This is where you can put the best sequence in place. You can start to let it run, but if you don't engage with it, it's about as worthless as if you just didn't work the lead to begin with, right? So leverage it where you can, create a full process, but get engaged and pay attention and make sure that you're noticing when there is some sort of engagement back, so that you can alter that sequence as necessary. So that would be the first one. That's the first example. Did I cover it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So do better market research to narrow down your targets. And I wrote in the chat there, you're niching the problem, not just the demographic, but you're niching the problem that they're having. Right.
Yeah.
And so you're finding that. And then once you begin the automation and build some workflows, then you have to look for when they engage. You're trying to give more value than what you're asking for. But once they engage, you need to be flagged so that you can engage back in a human way.
Exactly. And then alter the process as necessary, right?
Yes.
So,
right.
yeah. So more than just engage, but actually think through and make the changes necessary, because that's one of the biggest fails I see most people doing. So the second one is then on the challenges or workshops, like what we're doing with Chris, and how do we do the pre-selling? Because there you have to have more of the human touch. But even then, when you do the pre-selling, as you are setting up, you could still leverage those automation tools in the same way that you would in lead nurturing, right? So you're still going to go after, create your ICP, and then go after those that have all the same problems, niche your problem, as you coined it, right? And then once you get them into a process and now they've signed up, now it's how do you create a process that seems like you're engaging with them, that it's you, but you still automate some of that. That is a little bit of a tricky, and that's a little bit of trial and error on your own part to figure out how they respond. But immediately, as soon as someone signs up, you want to send them an email that says, hey, thank you. And, a lot of times what's really cool is, and Chris does a really great job of this, if you add a video to it, right? And almost like a Loom video. You can even personalize that Loom video so that it looks like, you can make it so personalized that it looks like that every time you send them one, it's that they think you've spent the time to do it just for them. When in actuality, you might not have done it just for them. You might have created one video, but sent it out. But you want to do little touch points like that, where they see you as the human engaging with them, even if you're not really doing that at that very moment, if that makes any sense. But then you just carry on through the sequence like you would anything else until you get up to that point where you're actually in the challenge itself. And then there's a whole after the challenge, there are all the offers and steps, the sequences that you can provide them afterwards. But again, you got to stay engaged in the process and just make sure that you're overseeing it and monitoring it. So I hope that answered that as well, Bruce.
Yeah, and that talks about the AI and human. Now let's talk a little bit about selling though.
Okay.
So in this world where people are more and more adverse to being sold, and they don't want all being bombarded with everyone trying to sell us stuff and push stuff. Um, how do you do some good pre-selling along the way? And not in a pushy way, but in a very genuine way, in helping them, solve whatever problem is that they're looking to solve, so that it becomes just a natural evolution straight into an engagement, or at least a long-term nurturing until they're ready to, and have a client engagement with you. So let's talk a little bit about that in today's world. And this is, really just the human selling aspect, but you'll of course infuse it into the electronic and communication you have.
Yeah, because I think the reality is I think to put it into context, because I think this is super important, right? When I hate to use COVID pandemic, nonetheless, though, it's changed dramatically. There was already an evolution happening before 2020, but it was at a much faster pace once 2020 hit, right? And that was that over the last 5 years, we went from needing 5 to 8 touch points, and where people were continuously from meeting to meeting to meeting, right? They were actually physically having to go from room to room, where they were less engaged, or from phone call to phone call, but nonetheless, they were not sitting in front of their laptop. So it was our job as coaches, as salespeople, as entrepreneurs, it was our job to educate our potential buyers, right? And through that education, they got to know us, like us, and then trust us, because they had to rely on us for their research, right? Now, if we think back at most of us, even if your potential client works in this hybrid model, they're still mostly sitting at their desk. They're leveraging Zoom. They have more access to the internet and to do their own research, or to even leverage Chat GPT, where everything can be brought into that, right? Because they're sitting at their desk. They're not having to get up and go from meeting to meeting any longer. So they are much more educated. So the difference between the buyers of then versus now is that they no longer need us to educate them. So if you take education out, how the heck are they going to know, like, and trust you? And by the way, now it's not even know, like, and trust, it's trust with credibility. How are they going to do that now? It's the experience that you create with them. It's the human part, the human element within the sales process that is absolutely necessary, because by the time they've come to you, I mean, here's the reality, even if we're coaches, you cannot sell something to someone who doesn't have a problem. If you do, it's usually because you've spent months and months and months and months, a very prolonged sales cycle, having these conversations with them to get to a point where they realize that they need you. Ideally, the ideal world is that you really need them. You're going to sell to them more effectively if they have a problem. They already know their problem now, and they've already researched it. So by the time that they have a conversation with you, they've already, in their mind, already decided roundabouts kind of what they're looking for. And you're probably one of the 3 to 5 people that they've already down selected. So now it's your job as the coach, the entrepreneur, the salesperson, because we're all salespeople, regardless of what title we have, right? It is now your job to, yes, confirm or affirm some of the research that they've uncovered, but then you've got to differentiate yourself from all the other people. The only differentiator that you're going to have is the experience that they get working with you as your coach, as the entrepreneur, providing them the service or the product that they want. And how are you going to do that? You're going to have to really start to focus on building the relationship with them. So the traditional way of just blasting them and then getting them on the phone and having a conversation and being able to sell them in the second or third call is not going to happen as easily. So the way I tend to do it now is, and by the way, 80% of buyers today leverage the digital content in order to make their buying decisions. And 95% of decisions are based on emotion. So take those two into account. Emotion is really going to be based on the human interaction, but then the digital aspect, 80% of their buying before they even get to you, 80% of the time, they've already decided what they want based on their digital experience. They've gone out on the platform, on the LinkedIn platform, they've done their homework on the internet. Mostly they're coming to LinkedIn though. That's where a lot of people are headed. They may not comment, they may not be posting content, but they're out there paying attention to all that you do. This is where you now have to position yourself a bit differently. You now have to start to become a thought leader, and you have to start providing information so that they seek you out, that the algorithm likes you, that they understand. Now, okay, if you're not a LinkedIn person, then you might want to just close your ears and maybe not adopt any of these strategies. But the reality is, where we live in today, most everyone is leveraging LinkedIn in our world. For us, everyone on this call. And so what you need to start doing is start to first build out some content, start communicating with people, get in the comments, have conversations with them. And once you've established a rapport, then take them to the DMs, right? That's more of a natural progression. And that's quite honestly what buyers today want. They don't want to be pushed. I can tell you now that the number of DMs or even emails and texts that I get are insane to me. And every one of them, I want to just say, delete. I don't want you to even contact me anymore. Now, in all fairness, that isn't super fair, because I am a salesperson, so I should probably help them out. But I mean, and I want to be as gracious as I possibly can, given that I understand they probably have no clue on how to sell. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing this. Your differentiator is going to be building the relationship, and having these conversations. So when you get on the DM, or when you're in the comments, or when you're in the DMs with them, start to ask them questions that uncover information that helps you determine whether or not they're a good prospect for you. It may take you 2 or 3 conversations before you even decide whether or not you can even qualify them in or out. Ideally in the past, it was like, okay, get on the call, quickly define whether or not they qualify, whether you can qualify them in or out, and do it quickly so you can move on. You still want to do it as quickly as you can, but it's not going to be in one call anymore. It's going to take you 2, 3, 4, 5 engagements. Now, it doesn't have to be over a 6-month period. It can all be at a very fast pace. It can even be as little as a week. But it is having those engagements with them and communicating and having conversation, asking them questions that will get you the information that you need to uncover where to actually start to target them. If they are qualified, what do you go after? What do you have the conversation with them about? And then when you're in the DMs, once you've established the credibility, then you can start asking them questions that kind of push them and challenge them a bit, decide whether or not they want to work with you. So I hope that answered your question, Bruce.
That's amazing, Denise. We actually have a question. It looks like Brian has his hand up.
So I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm going to try to speak slowly because I'm not a millennial. I teach and train the people that prospect me every day, all day, because it's a way to practice our own engagement before someone is interested in our product or service.
Yep.
So here's what happens. And this is fun for me, because if you don't practice talking with whoever about whatever all day, you're not going to be natural when someone says, hey, I'm ready, or I'd like your product, because you're going to be talking weird. So here's my experience. 5 or 10 times a day, people are prospecting me. Here's the type of thing that bothers me. Hey, checked out your profile. You're really doing some great work. I want to know if you can buy my bed. And I go, what's your name? Where do you live? Why are you talking to me? Just text it back. We're not talking yet. Some people have appreciated the exchange that I have with them because they really don't. I know they don't know. So let me teach them while they're engaging with me for these 2 to 3 seconds or minutes. And when I do that all day, I notice that my direct message box is really long, because I treat them all the same. Welcome to my Vibe and Tribe. Now let's talk. If you don't talk to me, I don't want to hear what you have to give me. You can't marry somebody the first time you say, hey, you don't know anything about them, you're asking to marry you. It's not going to work. So all I'm saying is, all of us that are on the call, we get prospected too all day. I'm saying practice. I'm saying engage, because they may be your customer, depending on how you treated them. You can flip them, but if you treat them like Alignable, LinkedIn, I literally talk to every person, even for a few seconds. And they remember that. If we communicate, I see you, I need you, I respect you, in 30 seconds, they can tell. So I just want to encourage those of us that are listening. We may not get you to buy our stuff, but talk to the people who are prospecting you. They came to you. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be first. Well, they came to you. Bring them over to your side because you got the skill, the heart. We cool. We entertainers. We know how to do it. That's all I'm saying. I just include my mouth with that.
Well, Brian, that's where I said for me, I've got to be more gracious, right? And I try to be gracious because they could learn from me. So I've taken that as well and adopted that strategy. I'm not always great at it, but I do think the more you practice, the better you get. So I agree with you on that. There was something I meant to tell you too, though, after when Brian was talking. So maybe I'll have to come back to that. If it pops in, I may stop us so I can, because there's something that he said that I wanted to highlight, but I can't remember what it was. So I apologize.
Yeah, the idea of no pressure conversations, I think, is really important these days.
Oh, that's Gwen, that is what it was. It was, think of it in this terms. In this terms, that was horrible grammar. In these terms, sorry. It's been a long week and it's Thursday late afternoon. Think of it in these terms. When we were isolated, when we finally had the ability to get back on and get active on the computer, at least, because that was at least the first step, we all wanted to engage, right? We all became part of these networking groups. We all got on and did virtual coffees, right? The goal was we wanted to, yes, most certainly expand our network. But at that very moment, when we first started, we wanted to get back out there and make some friends that were like-minded, but friends, right? You got to think about buyers today because that's where it started. And it's kind of, that's still the common thread amongst all of these relationships that we have, even in the sales world, is you got to think of them in terms of your friends. So you don't go to a new friend that you are just meeting for the first time and say, hey, I'm Denise, and I want to have a conversation with you tomorrow at 10 a.m., right? That's not going to work, right? You gotta move, you gotta kind of weave yourself in there, right? And think of the selling process just as that. It doesn't have to be long. So don't think of it in, 90 days or 6 months necessarily. You can shorten it and make it even a week, depending on how often you engage. But, we have an opportunity now at this time with the way we engage to actually build relationships very, very quickly, more so than if we're out in the world where we have to go meet them 2 or 3 times for coffee. You can do it in a very short span of time, but treat them as you would as you're building a friendship. When you take that perspective, you start to build a know, like, trust with credibility, and you start to uncover a lot of ways that you can potentially help them or not. And you can either move on or continue to allow that relationship to flourish.
Absolutely. Curiosity-based questioning is an art form, truly. But again, if you approach it like you are talking to a friend, it becomes much easier.
Yes.
Much easier. I
So
wanted to shift gears just a little bit because we're getting to the end of our hour.
Yeah.
And find out if you have any kind of insights on or recommendations for the solo entrepreneur who, are really our kind of core group here on how to approach AI sales implementation in a very cost-effective and scalable way. Like, how would you have them or guide them to use AI in their sales process?
Yeah, so I would say first off, you got to make sure that you go back to understanding what your objectives or goals are. That's first and foremost. Then I would suggest that you kind of get 2 camps together. One is, if I look at my processes today, I know what my end goal is. And if I look at the processes that make up that end goal, right? This is my objective. These are the processes that get me to my objective. If I look at, okay, here's what I'm really good at. And I've gotten so good at it that I could actually turn this into an automated process, right? So look at the things that you're really good at and put them in one camp. And then I would say, look at the things that you really suck at, right? I mean, I hate to use that terminology, but the things that you struggle the most with, that you're the most challenged with, and put them in one camp. Then look at it and say, okay, the ones that I'm struggling with the most, which one, if I could improve that, which one is going to move the needle the most, right? Which one is going to add to my bottom line revenue? And then you've got to look at the one that could you automate? If you automated this, how much time does it take me to do this? I'm really good at it. I'm on autopilot, but it does take me this long. If I had this much time and I automated one of my weakest areas that has the highest return on revenue, and then it still left me with, then I had now all of a sudden had time to work on some of these other things. Then you could say, okay, well, I want to automate this and I want to automate my weakest one that's going to get me the most return. And then I can, so when I automate this, I can focus on all the other things. You could also look at it as in, well, I'm on autopilot. It doesn't take me a whole heck of a lot. So I'm not going to worry about that because it's going to take me a little bit of time to get it automated. So I'm going to focus my energies on maybe these two things, right? I have a friend, she always picks threes. So she always does everything in threes. So maybe it's, one good one and that you can automate right away and two not so good ones. I always say at least at a minimum two, either a good and one bad or two bad, right? And bad's a terrible word to use, but the two areas that maybe you're the most challenged, and figure out ways to automate those. So that's the first step, is put them in camps and then determine where the biggest bang for your buck is going to be. And then look at the cost for those, then determine the solutions and look at the cost of each of those solutions. And what you want to understand is when you're evaluating those tools, if the cost is really low, but the return is really high at a really fast rate, then you want to maybe invest in that one over the other solutions, right? So it's really understanding what's your return on investment and what's the impact that it's going to make. And can I do it by myself, or do I have to pay someone to do it?
Awesome.
Or maybe if you don't want to do it, maybe you don't know how to do it and you don't want to pay someone, but how long is it going to take you to learn it, right? You got to factor out all those.
There you go. Yeah. You can either, do it yourself or have it done for you, or somewhere in between, have someone guide you, get a coach. Fantastic. That's great advice. And I love this idea of playing to your strengths and creating processes for that, but then also figuring out, those weaknesses, those challenge areas, and also addressing those. Because many of us do have those areas. I'm weak at marketing. Sales, good. Marketing,
But at least you admit it, right? Because not everyone is confident enough to say it out loud or aware enough to admit it because they don't think they're really as bad as they might actually be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think oftentimes, so often when we are challenged around a particular area, we tend to just ignore it. We don't want to address it, and that's what I tend to do with marketing. It's like, I'm just not going to do marketing. It's like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So,
and there's tons of AI marketing tools out there. That's not my forte, but there's tons of them out there that you could leverage for that.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has just been incredible. I would love for you to maybe share a success story of maybe how you have helped a client or two integrate AI, either using Salivators or, in other ways that has really boosted their businesses.
Yeah, so I think probably I was trying to make a list of the ones that I wanted to talk about. I think the one, there was a client, they were leveraging automation as a strategy, right? But they didn't really understand. So they had multiple tools. So they went out and they just bought or adopted, because not all of them were paid subscriptions, but they adopted solutions that just seemed like the cool thing to do. They didn't have a strategy in place. Their strategy was just automate as much as they can. They had overlapping tools, right? And what that caused a tremendous amount of chaos. It also then caused them to automate so much of their process that they lost the human aspect. So they thought that they were doing a great job by tackling all these potential clients, for lead generation. And what they were realizing was they were not getting any conversions at all. Like it was maybe, I don't even remember, but it was like 100 conversations to like 1 or 2 conversions, right?
Yikes.
They define their conversation a bit differently than I would have, right? So that's first and foremost, but nonetheless, it was a lot of effort for very little return. What we were able to do was go in and uncover, okay, again, understanding the objectives, what they were good at, what they weren't, figuring out which tool then mapped to exactly what they wanted to get accomplished, helping them to get that implemented, but helping them to see where they needed to automate that and where they needed to be engaged. Like, just because sometimes people just don't know what they don't know. So helping them see where they can really interact in that workflow was super helpful. So this is a crazy number. It resulted in an 80% success rate because they started from 0, right? So 80%. Now, if they had a 40% success rate, it might not have been that high, right? But they had 0. So then we went from 0 to 80%. And 0, I mean, it was like a 0.5 if we looked at it, right? But we had a 80% success rate converting their clients with having to do having to have fewer conversations and converting them at a much faster pace.
That's fantastic. That's really exciting. And yeah, agreed that, yeah, you can't take yourself out of it entirely as much as we'd like to. Very interesting. I would love for you to maybe share how entrepreneurs, specifically coaches, how they prepare now to kind of stay ahead of this rapidly evolving AI technology, sales technology, et cetera. Like, do you have any words of wisdom on how to stay ahead of it?
Yeah, so it'll also give me an opportunity to interject my last thoughts as it relates to humanizing sales. I think one of the things we do the worst job, and this will be a great segue and share why it's so valuable even in the AI space. But I think we do a very poor job. And I mean, a lot of us, it's not just, I think we just get so caught up in our own little worlds. We don't ask enough questions. So I even use this today in a live, but normally when you ask someone, how are they doing? They're going to respond with, oh, I'm doing great. Or, oh, I'm doing okay, or whatever. And we take it for face value. And then we just go on and ask the next question that has nothing to do with them, right? Or, we're already on to the next topic in our own head that we got to ask them. So we missed a huge opportunity to be curious. If someone says they're great, oh, why is it great? What has made today so great? Then you ask the next question after that. And then the next question, or if it was okay, well, why was it just okay? What would have made it great, right? It's really diving into the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th level questions, being curious, which then translates into AI. If you want to stay ahead of the curve, or at least on top of the curve, maybe not ahead, but at least on top of the curve, what you've got to do is be curious so that you are constantly out there looking and researching. It's not like it takes you don't have to read a ton of books, right? You don't have to spend 3 hours a day, but you do need to find those news feeds or those publications where you have access to what's new and stay on top of it. And don't just take it for face value. Start to look at other publications, or start to have conversations, or start to test out some of the tools yourself. Again, you don't have to spend 3 hours a day. Maybe just carve out, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever you do for enablement, so that you're continuously learning, staying curious. That's the only way you're going to be able to manage, because we have so many new technologies every day being released, and it's only going to continue to be released at a faster pace. I mean, Bruce knows this probably better than anyone, right? And he can probably share way more than even I have experienced with where he is in. But you've got to be sure that as you stay curious, that you're doing it on a regular and consistent basis, because there's new stuff happening every single day. I mean, look, I had that new solution. What did I say? Yep.so that I didn't even know existed, which is so super cool, just looking at what I could in the little time that I had. So I'm just being curious so that you're continuously learning would be what I would recommend to everyone.
And then how do you balance that with overwhelm?
Yeah, well, that's where you got to maybe have your objectives in mind, right? If you always have your objectives in your mind, your outcome, then when as you're being curious, you can say, "Oh, this is interesting, but I'm going to move on to the next item," right? And then, "Oh, this really helps me meet my objective. I might dive in a little bit deeper." So, I know it is overwhelming, so I guess you just got to figure out where do I want to spend my time so that I don't become so overwhelmed, right?
There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great
I,
tip.
I, li- I like to think of it as staying aware of the other tools, and then I only dive deep when I need something. So, but that's been a discipline I'm still developing because it's so easy to go and jump out and check the next new thing. And then,
Exactly.
some people like Gwen are she's a master at checking out a new tool and giving you a review, and she can spend an hour with a tool and give you a really good review. And then some people it's just that's a painful experience for them, so you got to kind of know what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. And if you're not a super techie, then pick one or two tools, stay really deep in them, and then just kind of be aware and listen, but not jump at everything that comes along, I think. So I don't know if that makes sense. You got to be self-aware as well as AI aware.
So
Agreed.
true.
Yep.
Know what you're good at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Well, before we close, I want to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity to connect with you and find you in the places where you're best found, Denise. So where can people connect with you?
Well, it is all on LinkedIn. I'm all in on LinkedIn. In fact, I'm switching my strategy to less outbound and more inbound. So you can find me. So my common thread amongst everything is AI, sales, and humanity. And so I have lives every week. So I'm doing CAF AI chats for AI. On Wednesday mornings, I am doing on Tuesdays my Celevators lives. And on Friday, I'm doing Coffees with Denise. Coffees is all around the humanity, the human connection. So I cover all three of those. So I'm always on LinkedIn. I've got a newsletter once a week, but it's at Denise Murtha Bachmann. Is my link. I've got websites. You can always check those out as well. But Denise Murtha Bachmann on LinkedIn, that's where you'll find me, and that's where I'm spending all of my time. And if we don't know each other, just get to know me. Comment and I'll comment back, or connect, follow, whatever you want to do, and let's start to have the conversations in the comments and then in the DMs.
Terrific. Wonderful. We've shared your LinkedIn links as well as your Facebook and Celevators. I encourage everyone to check out Celevators. Denise is inviting us to reserve a Celevator spot so you can check out her amazing program. And we want to just thank you so much again, Denise, for sharing all of your sales wisdom, just incredible, and your AI wisdom with a human touch. This has been really informative.
Thank you. I appreciate the time, and I hope everyone walked away with something new that they learned. And if you have any suggestions or comments or ideas that I can take on in ways to improve, or things that I didn't know, feel free to let me know. And I will be sure to tell you about yep.so. I'm excited to check that out.
No, I can't wait to, based on your recommendation.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Denise. It was great. A great conversation, and we learned a lot. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great rest of y'all's day.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.